There is a quorum of the Stormwater Committee, which means we can start the meeting. And John, you and Mary can represent the Public Works Committee, and if and until other members of the Public Works Committee join in here. So why don't we call this meeting to order at 7:02. And I would welcome, if anybody is watching on Facebook, welcome. Thank you for joining us. Just please know that if you are viewing this on Facebook, on the Facebook Live video feed, any comments you make will not necessarily, in all likelihood, will not be contemporaneously read or considered by anyone participating in this meeting. If you do have any comments to make on this, I would encourage you to send them directly to or call Carl Franz, Village Administrator Carl Franz at Village Hall. So with that, I will note that from the Stormwater Committee, Dave Benferrato, Carolyn Benferrato, Eric Riedner, Brana Hartzell, Dietmar Bosner are present. Gloria Beach and Mark Mandel are excused. And at this time, we have John Imes and Mary Sweeney from the Public Works Committee. We are also joined by Carl Franz, David Sykes, Brian Berquist, Mike Meyer from the village staff, and from the city staff, Chris Petikowski, Greg Fries, Janet Schmidt, Jim Wolf, and from KL Engineering, Brad. And Brad, how do you pronounce your last name?
Hulvenslaven.
Hulvenslaven. Hulvenslaven. Excellent. All right. So with that, Carl, agenda item 3, has this meeting been properly posted?
Yes.
Excellent. All right. Well, what I'd like to do is defer agenda item 4 to the end of the agenda, and we might even defer previous meeting minutes to a future meeting of both committees. So why don't we just move right to agenda item 5, presentation of plans for University Avenue reconstruction project, including additional storm sewer capacity. And my goal would be at the end of the meeting to have a recommendation for the village board to consider Monday night, just in support of the project as presented. So with that, Brad, Jim, Chris, Greg, Janet, who would like to go? The floor is yours.
Yep, I guess I will start with a presentation, and then I'll share my screen here. So let me know if any technical issues occur, and we'll go with that. Oops. Okay, so pretty much, if everybody can see that, the first slide.
Nope, we're not seeing it.
Nope. Okay. Sometimes I have issues with that, so I will go with this one. How about now?
That works.
All right. So, as far as the University Avenue project, this presentation is for the Village of Shorewood Hills. Of course, now I lose my mouse. There we go. All right, give me 1 second. Here we go. All right, so project. Now that I got that taken care of. The project begins, I know this is kind of small to see, but the project begins at the Shorewood Boulevard intersection and University Avenue. It extends to the east to just past the University Bay Drive intersection to about the Grand Avenue location on Campus Drive. It includes the full reconstruction of University Avenue, the reconstruction of University Bay Drive for about 1 block from University Avenue up to the Marshall Court Overlook Terrace intersection, and also the placement of a new pedestrian overpass over University Bay Drive. I'll get into more details itself, but that's kind of just the basic overview of the project. As far as the new typical section for University Avenue, it'll consist of 3 lanes in each direction, separated by a median. And there will be about a 7 to 8 foot sidewalk on the south side of the roadway and a new 5-foot sidewalk on the north side of the roadway. And those sidewalks will extend the full length of the project from Shorewood Boulevard all the way to University Bay Drive. Proposed improvements, just these are the general proposed improvements. So as far as pedestrian, there will be new curb ramps, that meet ADA requirements at all of the intersections. We will have a widened terrace for both to provide a little more green space and just separation from the traffic to the sidewalk. There will be that new sidewalk on the north side from University Bay Drive to Shorewood Boulevard, as mentioned earlier. We are doing the continental crosswalk markings, which are kind of the larger markings, if you can see on the screen here. So it's just more for high visibility, just to help promote safety for pedestrians when they're crossing, so vehicles can kind of see the crosswalk a little bit better. And there will also be a tabletop crosswalk at the University Bay Drive intersection. And this is pretty much where we raise the crosswalk up to the curb line, just to kind of promote safety as there as well. So vehicles will have to slow down as they go over that crosswalk, and just from a visibility standpoint, be able to see pedestrians crossing there better. Continuing on with the improvements, some safety and operations. So the intersections that currently have signals will get new signals. So the hill that's kind of around Schmidt Place, we will be lowering that hill as part of this project, just to promote a little more visibility and sight distance as you're coming over each direction, as you're approaching the intersections on that one. There will be a dual eastbound left turn lane at University Bay Drive, so that will be from the eastbound traffic heading north onto University Bay Drive, a dual lane there. There will be leading pedestrian intervals at the signals. What that means is that when a direction turns red, then the pedestrian will get a go before another direction turns green. So the pedestrian is able to get in the intersection before everything just changed green and vehicles can go, just to help promote a little more visibility and safety for pedestrians crossing there as well. And then countdown timers at the intersections for pedestrians to allow them to know when the pedestrian movement may occur. So on University Bay Drive itself, we will be reconstructing University Bay Drive from University Avenue to the Overlook Terrace Marshall Court intersection. So there will be 2 new northbound lanes for that block from University Avenue to Overlook Terrace. We'll be adding a northbound bicycle lane in that same stretch as well, and also a shared lane on the southbound direction. So just widening that out to get a little more vehicle and bicycle accommodations. There will be a new northbound bus pullout. So the buses will be able to just get out of traffic for the bus stop kind of there by the VA hospital. And then we will be adding a 10-foot sidewalk on the east side of University Bay Drive from University Avenue up to Overlook Terrace. And we will be extending sidewalk from Overlook Terrace all the way up to the Children's Hospital, where it currently ends right now. So there will be a full extension of sidewalk and connection from Overlook Terrace all the way up to that on the east side of the roadway. And we are also adding a new signal at that intersection as well. Continuing proposed improvements, as I mentioned, so we're doing a pedestrian overpass over University Bay Drive. It'll consist of pretty much a path along retaining walls for about half of it. So as kind of what's shown here, yellow will just be raised retaining walls for the path. And the other purple lines will actually be more of a bridge style structure. So the middle span, just what's spanning over University Bay Drive, will be a prefabricated steel truss. So it'll just be one single span over University Bay Drive. So there won't be any piers or anything in the middle, just one single span for that approach. Now, kind of what I think, talking about today as far as the actual watershed. So there was a watershed study completed for this area for the Willow Creek watershed as part of this project. excuse me, it was not part of this project. It was just a separate watershed study, but we did coordinate with them to improve the storm sewer as part of this project. One of the things from that, I'll continue on, was extending. So we're going to be installing a 96-inch storm sewer all the way from Shorewood Boulevard all the way to Grand Avenue to make that connection, just to allow a greater flow capacity and improve that drainage in this area, just to help improve that capacity along there as well. And that was part of the Willow Creek study. As far as just the storm sewer pipes themselves, we'll be replacing all inlets and storm sewer along the project, just to help promote the drainage with the new lanes and the new configuration of University Bay Drive. Just quickly go over kind of the schedule for this. So right now, University Avenue is scheduled to start construction in the spring. We say winter, so we're looking at starting in March of 2022. So that's why we say winter, spring, and it'll pretty much take the entire 2022 construction season. So pretty much to start off, they're just going to come in. They'll have to remove the median because we will be maintaining 2 lanes of traffic in each direction at all times. So we will pretty much have to switch traffic from one side to the other. So the first stage is pretty much getting ready for that. The second stage starting off in the spring. So we're going to shift all traffic to the south side of the roadway and reconstruct the north side. So that will pretty much take spring into pretty much most of the summer of 22. Then once that's completed, we'll have to do a little more median work in there. So as far as what we're calling our stage 2, where they're doing the north side, that will include the University Bay Drive construction. It will include getting that 96-inch pipe in and any of the intersections on the north side, including Marshall Court and a little bit at Shorewood Boulevard, and also the reconstruction or the construction of the bike and ped bridge over University Bay Drive. What we're calling a stage 3 is just we got to do a little median work before we reconstruct the other side. And then we get into what we're calling our stage 4. So this is where traffic will be shifted to the north side of the roadway, which was already completed. So they'll be on all brand new pavement, and they'll be reconstructing the whole south half of University Avenue for this stretch of the project. And then once that's done, pretty much anticipate the fall of 22. And then we will switch traffic back to what their normal lanes will be. There will be a little bit of median work in between that, but anticipated to be done pretty much probably November of 22. So a full construction season for this. We're looking at hours of operation to 7 to 7 and kind of 10 to 7 on the weekends. Otherwise, as far as driveway access, will pretty much be mostly maintained. And if they do have to close one access, it will be notifying all owners ahead of time for that work. So. And with that, I know that was just a quick, 15-minute summary of a large project that's going to take a while. So I guess with that, we will open it up to any questions.
Questions of Brad? I can't see. There we go. Anybody have questions for Brad? I have one, Brad. Do you have a sense of when this project will be bid out?
Right now, I think they're scheduling it for a December let. So that's when it will be bid in probably early December is the current schedule.
Okay. And then when do you have a timeline for when the bid will be awarded?
Typically, since it's through the DOT process, it does take probably about a month to go through the approval process, verifying all the information. So I would anticipate early to mid-January is when that would actually be awarded.
Okay. Any questions of Brad?
I have a question.
Mary.
Yeah, I'm sorry if this is, everybody knows this, but I'm new to this committee. I'm just wondering what the main motivations are for this work. It's traffic patterns around the hospital and or storm storm sewer related? Briefly, I'm just wondering what what is the motivation for this project?
I could jump in a little bit there. So the main driver was the pavement condition of the pavement. So it's rated a 4 out of 10 on our rating system, which is pretty poor for a arterial street that carries this much traffic. Also, as part of that, we wanted to solve, coordinate solving a lot of other issues. So we included the ped bike overpass with the project. We look at all the ped and bike accommodations and try to fill any kind of missing links there, like the sidewalk that we're adding on the north side and the sidewalk on U-Bay Drive. Also, with this, Greg and Janet with our stormwater section have been they've been adding a stormwater interceptor along this corridor over the past 10 years, from essentially Midvale Drive all the way to Willow Creek. And this is the one missing link in that stormwater interceptor. So that was also programmed to happen when the pavement was scheduled to be replaced. Well, there's a lot of stuff in there, but the pavement rating probably drove the timing the first. The most.
Okay, thank you.
And I think just to jump in a little bit too, from the village's perspective, we were able to the east side sidewalk on U-Bay Drive has been a long sought after item for the village. The bus pullout, the sidewalk along the north side of University Avenue, and then the overpass were all part of kind of in our planning processes really for the past at least 10 or 11 years. And this provided us an opportunity to get it funded. I mean, the federal funding of this project, really the village was able to get a lot of things, several things that we wanted to do and take advantage of the fact that the federal government would be assisting and paying for it.
And that bike path feeds into the existing bike path? Yeah, okay, thank you.
Yes.
Any other questions of Brad? I have one, and maybe this isn't the right time. Maybe there's going to be a more detailed presentation. It's a question about the stormwater mechanics. So should I just ask it, Chris, or should I hold it?
Go ahead and ask.
Okay. So, and everybody on the call from the city, thank you very much. I mean, from a village standpoint, we've really enjoyed working with you on these stormwater matters, and we look forward to the ribbon cutting for the 96-inch pipe. So when Amber Leffers from AE2S was contracted at one point by the village and then at one point by the village and the city to study this area, Amber identified two choke points in the areas of the stormwater system that were going to be connected, and one was at that were going to be connected to the 96-inch pipe. One was at Shorewood Boulevard, and then the other was at Grand Avenue. Basically, the two endpoints. So I'm just curious: will stormwater throughput be maximized to the greatest extent possible as part of this project at those 2 points?
this is Greg Freeze. I can't see Janet. Janet, do you want to take this, or do you want me to start taking it? I can't see you on the call here, so I don't want to talk over you.
There's
Go ahead, Greg, if you want to start.
Okay, I will start. David, thank you. For those of you who don't know me, Greg Freeze, I have been a stormwater engineer here for the city of Madison for a really long time, 30 years. And I have been working on this particular project for probably about 2/3 of that time, believe it or not. So, you know, Amber's model, Amber, we hired Amber Leafers to look at this area. Boy, it must be 5 years ago now, almost probably. And the analysis that she did took an existing model and she, you know, QA QC'd it and made some changes and came up with some results. For those of you who have been paying close attention to the stormwater part of this for, you know, quite some time, we never really we have some pretty good data from the 2018 storm where we had debris lines throughout the system that we went out and measured or shot elevations on after the event. And we could never, if you recall, we could never really get Amber's model to reflect correctly those elevations, right? Amber's model was always over predicting to some extent what the depth of flooding would be. So we, as was referenced here, we hired MSA to go through and essentially start from scratch and build this model from scratch again, and use some different techniques, specifically some different rainfall runoff, swim. The general swim model offers some different choices you can make when you are starting a model in terms of how you estimate rainfall runoff. There's a couple different choices and buttons you can pick. And so MSA did this a different way to try and get a better calibration to the watershed. And they also went through and answered you know, at our request, obviously, the very questions you are asking, David. And so one of the things we looked at, and I didn't jump in this manhole, but I did hang upside down in the manhole to see at Grand Avenue how we made that connection, because we made that connection way back, I think at about, oh my goodness, about 2011. And I was integrally part of that. I was the design engineer, but I could not remember what it looked like exactly. And I wanted them to be able to model it correctly. So right now, the box culvert that is there at Grand Avenue is connected to the 96-inch pipe that exists from Grand Avenue all the way to the outfall at Willow Creek. And so I hung upside down, got some pictures in there. MSA modeled that as best they could based on my photographs. And then we had, with Amber, in fact, with her model, we had always assumed that we would need a better connection there, right? A more hydraulically efficient connection. And so we had MSA do some pretty detailed looks at that in terms of what type of connection you could make, right? There's a lot of different ways you can do this. The way I can best describe for you, if you haven't hung upside down in this manhole, is the box culvert sits up in space and the 96-inch is off and down to the right. It's lower or to the left. It's lower and to the left, probably at about a 45-degree angle. And it sits, the top of the 96-inch pipe sits probably about 4 feet lower than the bottom of the box culvert, okay? So how did we make that connection back then? Essentially, picture, if you will, we cut a picture frame window about 6 feet long out of that box culvert and built a slide down and into the top of the 96. And that was what I recalled, and that was pretty much what my investigation a couple months or a month and a half ago into that reflected when I went and took those pictures. And MSA modeled a whole bunch of different alternatives in terms of what we do with that connection. And also, not only that connection, remember there's 3 points where the what I would call the buttressing system, which consists of the box from Midvale to Shorewood, which sits there now. And then what we are going to build now, which is a 96-inch pipe the rest of the way to connect into the remainder of the 96-inch pipe. Along that route, there are 3 places where that system is cross-connected or could be cross-connected: Grand Avenue, Shorewood Boulevard, and Midvale Boulevard. Currently, Midvale is closed off, it is blocked off. There is a 42-inch connection between the box culvert in University Avenue and the box culvert that runs behind the strip mall, I'll call it, on University and Shorewood Boulevard. And then there is the slip and slide, for lack of a better description, at Grand Avenue. And the what their analysis basically said is, to get the most bang for our buck, in other words, to use the 96 inches effectively as we can, to lower the flood elevations as much as we can, we have to remove the buttress wall that exists at Midvale Boulevard and reconnect that. We have to improve the hydraulics at Shorewood Boulevard, but we don't have to improve the hydraulics at Grand Avenue, which was a surprise, okay, to me. But they tried a number of different alternatives, right? They tried just increasing the length of the weir or the slide. They tried building a full structure, if you will. So imagine you built a giant rectangle around, sorry, my camera's not picking up much light here today. You built a giant rectangle around the box and the 96-inch pipe, brought them into this junction chamber and let the water find its own path. And there are limitations with both of these. And the model is able to sort that out a little better than you can do by hand. The model balances energy through the system. And they actually found out that it makes it worse. It actually, making that connection at Grand Avenue makes everything upstream of that worse. So they are not going, the proposal will not include any improvements at Grand Avenue. There is the 96 inches stubbed further west of that slide that I described, right? And so they will connect to that 96 inch, which is basically capped right now, and they will proceed from there. So that was a really long answer to your question, and I'm sorry about that, but
no, that was outstanding. I appreciate the level of detail, Greg.
So the answer is they did look at, we did look at this, and I say we, I didn't do this. MSA did this for us. MSA, Eric Thompson and his team did a really nice job and looked in great detail at each of these, because it's not just, you got to answer all these questions in a series, right? It's like well, what if I do one but not the other two? What if I do one and one of the other two but not, so there used to be, I can't think of a math word for this. It's factorial. This is a factorial problem, right? You have to answer each of these independently and then in any combination. So what they came up with is the combination that works best for the system. So, okay, I'll stop talking now.
So could I ask a little more, I probably wouldn't understand if you got into the engineering detail anyway, but when you say, when we talk about improving the hydraulics at Shorewood Boulevard, kind of what I sort of understood that from the progress meetings that I attend each month, but could you sort of explain what that will entail to improve those hydraulics? Is it just sort of changing how the pipes connect a little bit, or their angles of connection or something?
I think I can answer this, but it might be that Janet knows this better than I do, because she's been paying more direct a bigger direct role in this project than I have of late. Janet, are you able to answer that? I think I know the answer, but I don't want to guess here.
I forget the pipe sizing, and I should know this, but I actually do forget. Brad, do you recall do you have like a graphic of the intersection by chance? It would be, it includes like upgrades to the T and how it all kind of comes together. And I believe it's adding box. But if Brad has something, I think it'd be easier just to show it.
Yeah, if you give me 1 minute here, I will. bring it up.
I kind of asked the questions because I think the Stormwater Committee might be kind of interested in that detail a little more. And I know it may not be totally figured out yet.
I'm pretty sure the answer is no, and I know they moved the location of the structure a little bit to the west, I believe, and changed the angle. So hopefully Brad will show that.
Yep. Is that what you're looking for?
Yes. So let's see.
So we're extending the existing box to the west. So we're connecting to the existing box at the Shorewood intersection, extending that to the west, where we will connect to the new 96-inch storm sewer that will connect to the Grand Avenue that Greg was talking about earlier. And there will be a connection from that new box pretty much. So the current pipe kind of takes a 90-degree bend here and then heads north on Shorewood Boulevard. So since we'll be extending this one to the east, we're kind of making that connection with a new pipe from the new box up to kind of the existing box at that location, kind of to keep that continuity there. So I don't know if there's anything else, yeah, Greg or Jenny, any other details you wanted to talk about?
I think the goal here is to allow the water to cross connect, but to use the 96. So what you're seeing at this, you see a number 899 in the middle of the screen that Brad has shared. That's a structure number for them. And so it's going to be a connection to the box. And it is basically what this is trying to do is it will push the water down the 96-inch unless there is backup pressure, and then it flows to the north. The way this system works right now is all the water flows to the north and connects to the box culvert in the back. And that the way the model, and I want to be clear, the model is very interesting. I mean, from a geek perspective, which I am, the way this model works is it basically balances, it solves what's called the energy equation all the way through these box culvert systems to try and figure out the energy and the hydraulic grade line through these systems that will be created, and where the what we call the hydraulic grade line comes out of the ground. What that's telling you is that water is surcharging. Okay, it is coming out of structures. Now, we've all seen that here before. That happens at many places along this system. And I want to be clear, that will still happen in cases, right? We aren't able to solve this problem completely. We can make this problem less or improve the service, what I would call the service life or service level of service to this entire corridor with this 96. What we can't do is stop it from ever flooding, right? So, and the model does this in a way that if you had to do the calculations by hand, quite frankly, I don't know how you would do it. It takes just to put the world in perspective for everybody, it takes, I don't want to say a supercomputer, that implies too much, but it takes a very high powered computer about 4 hours to run one iteration through this system. So if you can imagine that, at the speeds that computers work at today, that is the level of mathematical computations that are being done to solve this problem. And from a hand calculation, it's really just not possible to do that level of math. You would have to take shortcuts. There's, because I mean, it would take you years essentially to do that level of analysis. So, but what I do want to also say is that sometimes the answers aren't what you expect, and that's okay, right? I would have expected that I needed a better hydraulic analysis or a better hydraulic connection at Grand Avenue. In fact, I counted on it but the model didn't indicate. In fact, the model was very clear that that a better connection at that point made everything upstream of there worse. And you know, and I don't want to imply that all they did was change one thing. They did sensitivity testing along with this, right? So you make a change and then you run it and you go, well, okay, that seems odd, right? Because, you know, myself, Eric Thompson and his staff, we've got a lot of time doing this stuff, doing these calcs, right? So you have some level of expectation about what's going to happen. If you didn't have an expectation, life gets a little dangerous, right? But you don't want to count on your expectation for the answer. So you do it once, you play some what if scenarios. What if I change this coefficient here? What happens? Is this a fluke, right? I try different things and I keep getting basically the same answer. What that's telling you is that the computer that's doing all that math has figured this out, right? And your expectation is wrong, right? And in a system that is this hydraulically complicated, that's not a big surprise, okay? Because it's just very difficult to tell where water is going to go based on what you are able to do by hand calculations. So this alignment is modeled in the system that Eric Thompson and his staff have modeled it from MSA to essentially optimize the system at all points, right? Because our goal here is to not make one place worse at the benefit of another place, right? That's not fair, right? So we want to, at a minimum, we want to make everybody no worse than they were. While, you know, that's the do no harm is the criteria, right? That's what we have to work with. So anyway, I don't know if that answers your question, Carl, but that's the best I got, I think.
Well, I think the main thing I was interested to hear, or that the new connection at Shorewood Boulevard, although it may not impact flooding in the village because that then connects to the other box, what you said, or what I heard, was that it's going to help eliminate water getting pushed north through the pipe.
That's correct, right? So when you look at this connection, in the light gray lines, you see the sweeping turn that the existing, it's kind of drawn, you know, like a 90-degree elbow, but it's got a curve to it, right? Some type of radius. And now you look at it and it's a T, right? So it is a true T. Water, generally speaking, has momentum. It wants to go in the direction it is already going. So I'm not saying no water will go north, right? But what will happen is the only reason water at this point would go north is if the 96-inch is fully pressurized and is flowing at above, you know, at full capacity. And basically the water at that T intersection has essentially stagnated, right? Then water is going to start looking for a place to go. Now, if the box is also stagnated at that time, so, you know, say we have the 2018 event again, knock on wood, right? Hopefully not ever, but you have that, both systems are already at capacity. What's really going to happen is the water is going to come out of the inlets. It's going to flood, you know, that will be what happens. That doesn't change because Shorewood Boulevard is the lowest spot on this system, right? There's nothing, you know, there's nothing except another glacier that's going to change that fact. And so that won't change in those large events that exceed the pipe capacity. But the 96-inch pipe adds, to put the world in perspective a little bit, it varies a little bit at different locations, but it adds over 400 cubic feet per second of capacity through the system, okay? And it's, for people, it's really hard to understand what a cubic foot per second is. But it is 400, 1 cubic foot per second is, how can I describe this? Well, let's see, here's a nuance for you. When an inlet that you see a grate in the street is gushing water, right? The water is 4 inches deep and you see it pouring into the grate. That pretty normally tops out at about 2 cubic feet per second. So you get some sense of scale here in terms of what 400 means, right? It essentially, it can take 800 inlets at capacity. If that, you know, or
Greg,
not, I'm sorry, the other way, 200 inlets. I multiplied instead of divided. So it's 200 inlets at capacity. So.
Greg, to put it, I guess into comparison, this is Austin, Public Works. How would you describe that increase versus current capacity, cubic feet or current flow rate? I mean, it's kind of like almost like a waterfall rate, right? Cubic feet per second flowing down. Like how, on a percentage basis, what does that look like versus, you know, for increase in infrastructure capacity?
Give me 1 second here. I got a table to pull up for you or to look at, so I don't want to misquote this. So you know, it varies a little bit along the system, but right now the existing system has the 6x15 box. It varies along its length, but I'm gonna average because the slopes change, and as the slopes change, capacity changes a little bit. But it is, the low end is 530 cubic feet per second capacity, and the high end is about 700 and change. Okay, and with when you look at it with the pipe basically adds. It varies again a little bit, but it adds over 400 to 470 CFS of capacity to that system. So
75 to 85% ballpark, kind of.
Yeah, I mean it doesn't double the capacity, but in a ballpark way, you add that's probably probably averages about 60. You add about 60% additional capacity back into this system. If that puts the world in a little bit of perspective.
Yeah, it just gives it a good factor to compare where our improvement is, where we're coming from and where we're going to. So.
That was excellent, Greg. Changing from the mechanics of the throughput, what was the final determination on installing that new 96-inch pipe under it looks like it's being installed under the westbound lanes, and that means it'll have to go through the, whatever you call it, the Supper Club Hill or the Bagels Forever Hill, the Schmidt Supper Club Hill. Will that be trenched or bored?
I think Brad or Janet are the persons who's going to answer that one for you.
Brad, correct me if I'm wrong, but at this point, I don't think we were going to dictate the methodology for the contractor.
Correct. We're giving him the option to either open cut it or bore it, because there is a little bit of rock down in that location. So just for some cost efficiencies, we're giving them that option.
Okay. Well, either way, Carl Franz, you're not going to be here when this happens anyway, so I should be talking to somebody. Carl's retiring. Does everybody know that? Carl's retiring at the end of the year.
Oh, congratulations, Carl.
Yeah, thanks.
But I'm just, maybe to the Public Works Committee and the Stormwater Committee, I'll just say this out loud. We should keep attuned to that, because if they're going to be boring through rock or even trenching through rock, my guess is it's going to be felt and maybe heard. So we'll just have to keep that in mind and give residents a heads up.
I did see also on the scheduling, Brad, that it's possible or likely that if tunneling was chosen, that may be at night. Is that a firm or just a possibility?
That's just a possibility. Looking into talking with some of the contractors who may do that. Sometimes they don't like to bind if they stop the boring machine, sometimes they can bind against the rock. So that is, it's a possibility. It's not necessarily, they said it's not always an occurrence, but that just is an option that may happen. So.
10-4.
Hey, since I got a whole bunch of experts online here, I'm curious if there is an average. You guys have probably all studied the geotech reports. Do you know what the average bedrock depth is around this area?
It It varies actually quite a bit. Just in that hill, it's probably about 10 to 12 feet deep just on that hill. But once you get beyond that, then it gets down to, below 20 feet deep, even more. Some locations, I think we went to 30-foot plus borings and they didn't find any at that depth. So it kind of varies where you're at on the corridor.
When
Okay.
they start digging, if that's gonna hit that. But yeah, thank you.
Other questions of Brad, or should we turn the platform back over to Chris or whoever from the city? Do you have additional presentations, or was that?
That was it.
That was it. All right. Additional questions regarding the project? All right. Hearing none. And I'm just looking, I'm scanning. I don't see anybody with their hand raised or waving their arms. What's the sense of the village committee members? Should we thank the city staff and dismiss them and let them go get their popcorn ready for the Bucks game? All right, I think so. So,
Thank you all.
Chris, Janet, Brad, Jim, Greg, thank you all very much. Very helpful.
Thanks a lot. Appreciate the great presence tonight.
But the rest of you hang on.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
All
Thanks,
right.
everyone.
Take care. Have a good night.
So you're all done with city staff? We can
Yes.
exit the meeting? Okay, thank you.
Yes. Thank you, Chris.
Thanks.
Thank you. Thank
Thanks,
you,
Greg.
Greg, Janet, Brad. All right. So now it's just Shorewood folks. So let's see, do we have a quorum of Public Works? John, Austin, Mary? I don't
No.
think so.
No, we have 3.
Okay, so what I would suggest is we just make it a general motion, or perhaps a motion just in the Stormwater Committee to, and I don't want to put words in anybody's mouth, but maybe those on this call also want to get popcorn ready to watch the Bucks game. So perhaps just a motion from someone on the Stormwater Committee to accept the project as presented for recommendation to the village board.
Make a motion to accept the plans as proposed by the city.
Wonderful. Thank you, Dietmar. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by Carolyn. Any discussion? Okay. I would just, under discussion, I would just ask, Carl and Brian have really been our point people on this. And as we all know, Carl is going to be retiring at the end of December. We're going to be having a new village administrator. So I think it'll be all up to Brian. No, it will be all up to all of us to really pay attention and be ready to pay attention to details, because we're not going to have Carl Franz to go to for, we might call him at home. I don't know. We won't have, and Mike, I'm sorry, Mike, I meant to mention Mike Meyer. So all the more important for Mike and Brian to really understand this project. Maybe Carl, maybe the 3 of you should have a sit down in terms of, common contacts that you use, go-tos, when you want a quick answer to a question, So as I understood, Jim Wolf from the city is the project manager.
Correct.
Is that right?
Yep.
Okay. Mike?
He is, and Chris is heavily, and he's pretty heavily involved.
We're lucky. Chris Petakowski from City Engineering lives in the village, and so we have a really good connection there. So I would just encourage, Mike, if you think you need some introductions to folks that were on this call that you haven't been introduced to, ask Brian and Carl for that. If you have to ask Carl before he leaves.
I won't retire until May or June.
I But I do think you can be confident. Brian is, I mean, I'm pretty much in those monthly progress meetings. Actually, we had 2 meetings today. We had a progress meeting at 10 o'clock and then traffic control meeting this afternoon, because they're dealing with all the emergency vehicle access is a, you know, a major issue there when you're under construction. How do you get ambulances and people in their cars to the emergency ward when you've got lane closures? And so it's pretty interesting. Actually, I'll just relate this, and I think it was Mike Meyer's wife who is a head of emergency management and
For Dane County.
yeah, and the EMT stuff, and they had done a lot of work, and they're actually going to be. I mean, this is just sort of interesting. I find the only reason I bring it up, I found it interesting that they, you know, one of the things they're going to do is emergency vehicles that are coming northbound on Midvale aren't going to go all the way down to Midvale and then try to take a right on University. They're going to be monitoring the situation closely all of the time, and then at certain times, and perhaps most of the time, those ambulances and paramedic units are going to be taking a right on Mineral Point Road and going on Mineral Point Road to Speedway and then heading straight up Highland and just avoiding that whole area. So it was just interesting to hear, you know, how these different services try to accommodate things.
You bring up a really good point too, though, about, and I missed part of the discussion earlier, and maybe you guys have covered this, but the secondary traffic that's going to filter through. This is a different discussion for a different night, but secondary traffic filtering through Shorewood and even Station 9 and their response times coming through Locust and, you know, through the village is going to change, and how they react, I guess. And maybe that's more of a question for Mike's wife in the future, how we want to handle traffic flow on a broader spectrum.
Yeah. But at any rate, but what I meant to say is I attended both those meetings today, but for the most part, Brian's the engineer, and he's been at all those progress meetings, and he's been really, really helpful to the village in terms of keeping track of things. He's worked the easements we've had to acquire there have been a real pain in the whatever. And Brian has taken the lead on that, like working with the property owners along there to deal with those easements and property acquisitions. So I don't think you have too much to worry about, at least on the technical side of things, because Brian's really been on top of it. It's probably going to be more the dealing with the complaints and the issues that are going to crop up as people try to get through here. And
it is. There's going and Austin, you raise a good point. There's going to be whatever is called flow over traffic that will try to shortcut through Lake Mendota Drive, Oxford, Lake Mendota Drive, and so on. And
I think the biggest one's going to be behind McDonald's and Locust.
Locust, yeah.
That's like the secret that everyone's going to find out, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Google Wayfair or Google Maps or whatever it's going
to
do their magic, and we're going to have a parade.
Right. So we'll just have to keep an eye on that, and if any particular route gets out of hand, we'll just have to focus on that. So any questions on the motion? Dietmar made a motion to accept the plan as presented for recommendation to the village board. There was a second by Carolyn. Any discussion amongst Stormwater Committee members? Seen none, ready to vote? All those in favor, raise your hand or say aye.
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 Wonderful. I'll count that as a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5-0 vote. Thank you, Dietmar. Dietmar and Brana are new members of the Stormwater Committee. Thank you both very much for joining us. Dietmar, that was your first official act on the Stormwater Committee.
Well, that's great. Yeah, I mean, it's a wonderfully challenging project, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot, the brain power spent on it is above and beyond Probably,
$31 million project.
there you go. See what money can buy you.
Yeah, and this isn't about, this committee meeting tonight is not about the financing. We had a special meeting of the Plan Commission last night, and they made a recommendation to extend the life of TID 3 in the village for another 3 years that the village board will take up Monday night. That will allow the village to pay for a very significant portion of its share of the project, which is anywhere between $5 and $6 million. It is the largest, by far, the largest infrastructure project the village has taken on, period. For a little community like the village of Short Hills to take on a $5 to $6 million infrastructure project is like trying to swallow 8 watermelons at the same time. All right, well.
But it's a serious commitment for our future, right? I mean,
Yes.
that's the reality of it.
Absolutely.
Yep.
So again, I'm going to suggest we defer minutes from prior meetings to a future meeting. Unless Stormwater Committee members want to discuss the minutes from October 15, or should we just put them off to a future meeting?
I think future meetings.
Future meeting,
maybe.
okay. From a stormwater perspective, from a stormwater committee perspective, I sense we have one more issue that the village board would like to use our subject matter expertise on, and that is, it was mentioned by the city officials earlier on this call, and that is the Willow Creek Watershed Study. That is scheduled to conclude later this year, and I would hope, you know, the city and the village have been working in a very cooperative fashion over the last 5 to 10 years on stormwater issues. I would hope once they conclude it, they would do what they just did, which is make a dedicated presentation about that drainage basin study to the village of Shorewood Hills, the Stormwater Committee. And then we would be able to ask them questions about that. I think it's important for the village to be very present in that matter and ask questions, because 84% of the stormwater that flows through our village originates in the city of Madison. So I think we have to be very present and vocal and pay attention and go in eyes wide open. So, but after that, I think the stormwater has done its work, and I would recommend at that point to the village board that the stormwater committee be dissolved and all stormwater matters revert back to the Public Works Committee.
Yep.
So my guess is that will be sometime in 2022.
Yep.
All right.
Good.
Well, so there are no future stormwater meeting dates. John, anything you want to say from a Public Works perspective?
No, just thanks to Mary and Austin for joining us tonight. I know Katie Pitakowski wanted to be with us as well, but the city attorney weighed in, and with Chris's involvement, she wasn't able to participate tonight. But yeah, good presentation. I've kind of followed some of the earlier presentations. This thing's on track, as Dave mentioned. We made a recommendation on the TIF 3 extension last night, so we can pay for it. And who knows, maybe some infrastructure money will come down the pipe here at the federal level and benefit the village in other ways. And of course, we're going to watch that very closely.
Mhm.
Yes, very important. All right, thanks, John. So anything else good for the order? All right, it's Bucks time. Let's
Yeah,
go.
go Bucks.
Let's go make it 2 and 2.
That's right.
All right.
All right.
Hear the deal.
All right. Have a good night.
All right. Be well,
Yeah,
guys.
thank you everyone for all the work you guys put in. Appreciate it.
Thank you guys. See ya.
Thank
Take
you,
care.
everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Carl.